My mission to become a master artist has brought me to a lot of very strange places. Mostly just drawing a bunch of naked old men, but I at least got to do that in Italy for a summer once, so that counts for something, right? What drawing has brought me the most of is pain, and a lot of it. I've had years of embarrassingly bad drawings under my belt at this point, but learning new things still sometimes feels like I'm Sisyphus, just barely keeping my boulder of shame from rolling back down on top of me. So I challenged myself to learn how to paint flowers. I thought this would be a nice, relaxing, expressive break from my normal portrait and figure painting. This was a grave mistake. I think I found the only type of painter more masochistic than I am. Okay, first I started with this sketch after Henri Fantin-Latour, the living legend. And, well, actually, he's not really alive. He probably died like 150 years ago. And he might not really even be your legend. He's my legend, but there's a good chance you haven't heard of him. He's one of my favorite floral painters, so that's what counts. And I did this sketch for one reason, and that's because I needed to pad my ego, all right? We got a long journey ahead of us. And I'm uniquely good at one skill set, that's making a study that looks convincingly good without actually learning anything. Art is kind of unique in that way that I think it's especially damaging to the ego. It's really embarrassing to make a bad drawing when you, the 18 to 24-year-old, probably according to my demographics, right? You, the 18 to 24-year-old, makes a drawing and you gotta hide it from mom so she doesn't hang it up on the fridge. That hurts. And learning a new skill or studying someone new, it also hurts. It should hurt. If you made that study and it went smooth, you probably didn't try that hard. I'm not really talking about this painting all that much because it went really smooth. I think I made it, I don't know, I was probably kicked back with a joint in one hand, a glass of whiskey in the other hand. I was painting on my feet. It went too smooth, all right? I wasn't pushing myself. But doom was lurking over me without me even knowing it. This painting gave me the confidence to try and battle a titan. Now that titan is this little square of canvas right here. This lighting isn't exactly made to show off paintings. It's made to hide the fact that we're in a closet right now. And despite having seemingly dedicated my whole life to it, I really think I hate details. I don't care how beautifully one eye is rendered if it's off the axis of the whole face, right? We've all seen that one drawing. And similarly, this is what's led me to like painters like Fantin-Latour, much more than, let's say, early Renaissance painters who are interested in a much softer, more subtle expression of form. Or at least I thought. But you never really have seen a piece of art until you try to copy it. If we're gonna talk about floral painters, you can't get far without hearing the name Rachel Ruysch. Rachel was a Dutch painter who's best known for being a girl boss and one of the best floral painters of all time. I think she's better known for being messed up in the head. I didn't get that from a book. Just look at her paintings and you'll see, and I mean really look at them, zoom in on them and you'll see individual atoms and molecules. I didn't even know they had discovered that stuff back then. I thought they still thought elements were made out of wind. She was ahead of her time, I guess. With this meticulous attention to detail is a lot of time that comes observing, studying, and memorizing these different forms. Of course, she couldn't just set up this still life and then paint it. It would take way too long. This is masterfully stitched together from countless numbers of studies. So I chose to make it easy for myself, right? I would choose one flower, and it should just be a 1 or 2 day job, right? I think I still have PTSD from this one. It took me an entire week to get this painting to a point where I was at least somewhat happy with it. Here's the problem. These values are psychopathically close. Form, or the feeling of three-dimensionality, is created through contrast, putting light on one side of something and dark on the other side of it. And what's ever blocking that light is 3D, right? That's how we make things look three-dimensional. And it's a little bit harder than this too. You can't just go from black to white because my white paint is not gonna be as white as the sun is, and my black paint can't possibly match the void that I stare into when I remember that I dedicated my entire life to painting. Even more complicated is the fact that you can only use up that value scale, how bright something is to how dark something is, on the whole painting. So if you choose to use all of your black and all of your white on one flower, then how are you supposed to make that stand out from the rest of the painting? And this is what tortured me for days, because high-level painting is making this very small, tight range of values look incredibly three-dimensional and filled with form. It's incredibly difficult. I would spend whole days working up the intricate folds and petals of this flower, and only to find out that it was just too dark the next day. And then I would spend a whole day brightening everything up, and I would realize that I brought everything up too much, and it was too bright now.
Now, this is not to mention that we also have something called hue, which means color temperature comes into play. So now we can differentiate things not based on value group or light contrast, but by varying the hue back and forth between warm and cool and making things stand out based just on that. Or you can interplay it with value changes to make things that are incredibly close together stand out because one is warm and one is darker and one is lighter. And
all of this brings us back to something called indirect painting, and it's the dark art of painting that I have tried to avoid. Indirect painting is when you add thinner or oils to your paint to make them go down in a transparent wash, and then you use layers of building this up in order to achieve more subtle effects. And this is something that some people swear is the key to all this old master painting, but to be honest, it's just a tool like anything else, and it's often a tool that I don't really find the use for. Until I started working on this painting, because now I could take a whole group of leaves that were just a little bit too dark and glaze a thin wash of lighter color over them and unify them together, bring them all up in lightness and make more subtle shifts. Now, there's a whole other arc in this too, because once I started glazing colors, I realized that I was using a paint called titanium white, which makes things a little bit too opaque, which is difficult to glaze with and make layers from, and it also cools down colors a lot. It's a very dominating color, and so I ended up making my own white paint, but I'm not adding all that into the video because I think I have like 50 subscribers, bro. I just do way too much. I can't casually invest myself into anything. I made a video about it on TikTok if you want to see it. Did really well with the ladies for some reason, but okay, we're gonna stay on topic here. I'm literally going insane because I could be like a programmer or something. Why am I doing this with my life? Now, with a crushed ego and a humble heart, I am returning to the man who started this all, Henri Fenton-Latour. And this time, I am not here to make a beautiful painting. I am here to tear this man's flesh from his body and wear him like a suit. I need to be inside of Henri. Flowers. Let's. I think these lilies would make a nice solo painting. Here's something that you'll never find me saying about women. Let's just cut all this fat at the bottom and focus on this up top. Jesus Christ. Oh, I'm losing it. Now, many challenges of what we dealt with in the last painting are here again in this painting, but Henri solves them in completely different ways, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about art. It's also the thing that's entirely maddening, because there's so many different ways to solve the same problem, and there's no set formula as much as we kind of want there to be nowadays. Thinking that you're going to make an entirely novel way to approach a painting is pretty naive. There's been thousands of years of painting before us, and people in prior generations were honestly much more creative and better at working from limited means than we are nowadays. But what we can do is work to our strengths and combine these ways that we have unlimited access to nowadays in interesting and new combinations. And that's what interesting painting is nowadays. Now, I've been feeling pretty good about drawing lately, actually, and so I want to torture myself because that's what I do here. And this painting has a thin, warm brown wash in the background. And if Henri did a pencil drawing or charcoal drawing under it, which was pretty common for the time, you would see that drawing under this thin wash. So basically, you'd have to approach this painting with no underdrawing if you want to maintain that nice warm background, that transparent background. And that's what I did. I made this entire drawing without making really any mistakes. I just approached it in a big to small way, focusing on the big proportions and relationships first, and I was actually surprisingly close. This never happens. I actually had very few problems with this, and I just had a little bit of cleanup to do at the end, but I made the entire drawing with just paint on a brush. Again, the difficulties of this painting come from the value groups. The problem with white lilies is that they're incredibly white. Even the shadows on them are very light. light. And in order to have a good painting, you have to have a very clear group of shadows and a very clear group of lights. And you need some transitions in between those most of the time too. So how do you do this on something which shadows are so light? Well, it just means you have to be very precise about your color mixing. Rachel solved this problem with the scalpel, with surgical precision of glazing and building up layers. Fantin Latour, he solves this problem with a sledgehammer. He just mixes the right color and just puts it on directly. It's very thick. There's nothing going on that's magical. He's just a boss. He just does it right. At this point, I am a hardened veteran of floral painting. I've been doing this for 2 whole weeks, and I can feel the generations of old masters that I'm standing on the shoulders of. They're whispering into my ears the motions of the next brush strokes, and also to try eating the paint because it has a really interesting texture that might feel good on my tongue. And for the next 3 hours, I put on my apron, I hit the record button, and I pop off harder than I've ever popped off before. I painted the shit out of this lily. And it's really hard to make painting sound cool, but it was a really good session. I didn't need to make that many adjustments to this. It was just a damn good session, probably the best of the whole week that it took me to paint this. As I get up from that day, I go to turn off the recording, and I see that it's been going for 48 hours because I forgot to hit off the morning before. Now, a normal 4-hour-long recording is over 20 gigabytes on my computer. A 48-hour-long recording has the potential to nuke my entire hard drive. So I stood there with only one option, hands shaking. I hit the stop recording button. The gods of painting bestowed upon me a gift so powerful that it could not be shown to the general public. Honestly, this painting went pretty well. I had already taken out all my anger on Rachel, and I'm now a Zen master of floral painting. There was a lot of going back and forth, making these small adjustments, but what that did, and painting so directly, built up a really beautiful texture that I like a lot. This painting up close, it just doesn't get any justice done by the camera. It focuses on all the little details, which aren't the point. This painting from far away looks completely different than it does up close, and that's actually really fun to look at. I might have just spent the last few weeks chasing the opulence of details, but that's not what matters. I didn't come here to make something beautiful. I came here to contend with myself, to make myself better than I was the day before, and I achieved that. And it's fun to recount all of my strife from these past few weeks, but I've already started the next series of paintings, and I'm ready for the roller coaster that brings too.